Hello, Carmen. Thanks for being with us today. You are both WFP's Director of School Meals and Social Protection and the Director of the School Meals Coalition Secretariat and the brains behind this new report, the WFP's flagship State of School Feeding. So let's dive into the key findings. To start, headline number: 466 million children now receive school meals through national programs. What does this milestone actually mean? What is driving this?
Well, so we're very proud of the report that's coming out soon. And the 466 figure, of course, is important when we remember that there has been a 20% increase over the last 4 years of the number of kids that receive meals. So one of the interpretations of that number is that this is a period of sustained growth. So we are seeing a massive success story happen before our eyes, which is hard to come by these days. So the first thing is that big news of a good news story that we're doing something right. And I think it's important to remember that this is happening in a period that has been quite difficult, right? So it covers the pandemic. And it covers also recent economic downturns in many countries. Even throughout those shocks, we have seen governments continue to invest in these programs. So the second thing that tells me is that presidents, decision makers, leaders are putting the futures of their children, of the next generation first, and really choosing to invest.
The report highlights a remarkable increase in school meals coverage in low-income countries, in particular across Africa. What's driving that?
Well, one thing that I think is really important to notice is that this isn't a given, right? That low-income countries where they have a lot of problems in terms of financing, in terms of fiscal space, these are the countries that are making the most progress and the most efforts is really commendable. And that's something that in the report we want to celebrate. We want to highlight that success. One of the reasons why that is the case is because leadership in Africa has really stepped up. And we're very proud of the work that we've seen, for example, the leadership of President Ruto in Kenya that decided that this was one of his priorities. They're moving towards universal coverage of school meals, covering all kids in the country. The same was part of a decision that President Kagame made about 4 years ago. President Talon has followed that as well. We see other countries stepping up, including governments like Haiti and others, where partners and the government are stepping up their support to these programs. So clearly, it's a matter of political will. It's a matter of a program that everybody now knows works, that is an established policy, that leaders are responding to it in such an important way for kids in those countries.
And if we look at WFP's role within that, WFP is often more commonly known, recognized as a sort of frontline emergency responder. But it seems that what WFP has done here is quite different. Can you tell me a little bit about the backstory to how WFP ended up in this position?
Well, the World Food Program has about 60 years of experience with school meals, and it is still one of the proudest programs that we have. We're very proud of the support that we provided to governments. But for a very long time, when we started it in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, it was really an emergency support program and very much in the character of the rest of what WFP does. But then we started to see that these were really strategic programs that were helping not just in the immediate response to a disaster or to a hunger situation, but that could pave the way for better futures for children, for their education, for the future of society, et cetera. So they turned quite quickly into, for us, kind of a short-term and medium-term and even long-term investment in country stability, making sure that we weren't losing the gains that we had fought and that governments had fought in such a hard way, making sure that these programs were there for kids throughout their period in school. And so we switched our approach. We thought, okay, we need a longer-term approach to this. We need to think about how to accompany governments throughout a period where they might need WFP now, but our end goal is to leave behind sustainable national school meal programs that don't need us anymore. So how does that transition start to happen? How do we put in place the building blocks for that sustainability in the long run? And it turned out we were pretty good at it. About 50 governments have received WFP support and now completely self-reliant, not dependent on aid. Most of Latin America started with WFP support in the 80s and 90s and now have almost all universal coverage of programs fully funded by the state. So we have been able to prove that concept, that a UN agency like WFP can be a stepping stone, can be a transitional supporter of what is ultimately the responsibility of the government. And so what we're focusing on now is how do we then take the next generation of countries through that process? We've identified about 15 to 20 countries that are in that transition space where we're going to the government and saying, okay, what do you need from us, from other partners, so that we can work with you through a period of years? What's important also is to make sure that we're there for those years. This isn't a short-term kind of hit and run approach. It's how do we make sure that we're there for 5, 8 years, for the time that the government requires us to be through that transition, so that we can accompany them through a planned process of handover. And it's worked. Kenya is one of those examples that we're most proud of. We transitioned out of direct support in 2019 after 10 years of a planning process with the government. And now Kenya is one of the success stories in Africa. So that's what we are hoping to do in the future as well.
And another thing that comes out in the report is that school meals are a lot more than just a plate of food, and that they really see gains beyond education, beyond learning, also into climate resilience. How and why is it that school meals are able to have this sort of cross-sectoral gains?
Yeah, that's the beauty of the platform. We call it a platform because it's more than a plate of food, as you've mentioned. We know these programs have really important benefits for education and for nutrition and health, which is more kind of the no-brainer of the program. But what governments are more interested in the last few years, I would say, with our support as well, is thinking through what if they invest very scarce resources. Of course, no government is swimming in money these days. This is hard-won funding from domestic sources, from donors. How do they make sure that these dollars are going further and further? One of the ways is by investing in a school meal program that is supporting children to get food, but also supporting smallholder farmers, for example, to get access to markets to be selling that food to those schools. So all of a sudden, we're not just benefiting one part of the population, we're also benefiting the producers of the food, the ones that are cooking the food. There's job creation opportunities that are suddenly opened if those programs are buying locally. There's all kinds of benefits in terms of really looking at the programs as platforms for food system support and how are we getting more local food into those programs. So if you look at, just the stat, which is incredible, 70% of the food that governments buy goes to schools. That's a huge market, and it's enormous opportunity for the government to support that local economy if that policy is designed in a way that's supporting the smallholder farmer. So there's an opportunity to connect to that local economy. There's also an opportunity to influence what children are considering good nutrition. Because in that age group, when we are small and when we are in school and when we are going, we're looking at what our classmates are eating, we are taught specifically a relationship to food when we're young. And those habits stay with us through adulthood and beyond. So governments can also invest in making sure, and we can also invest in making sure that children are getting diets that are sustainable, that are nutritious, that are more and more supporting the planet in eating things that are going to be more sustainable in the future. And we can educate an entire generation of children that then become adults that learn how to eat better and how to eat more sustainably. The added benefit also is the government is saving in the future in, for example, issues around obesity and overweight that are really expensive for health systems to carry forward later. So by investing in children very early, you're also figuring out how are they going to be healthier adults in the long run. So these are programs that can carry benefits over and over and over again, even beyond the period in which the government's invested.
Well, Carmen, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today.
Sure. Thank you.